But now I would like to turn here to a studio where we're joined by Mr. Amir Bardan, council member of the Tel Aviv Yafo municipality and also a member of the Hadash party and Major General in the Reserves, Mr. Eitan Dangot, former military secretary to 3 Israeli defense minister and former coordinator of government activities in the Palestinian territories. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time. And going back to Jonathan's concluding remarks. Israel wants to end it. Islamic Jihad wants to drag it in the hopes perhaps that Hamas will have to join in. So the party that has much to lose is Israel, what we call injury time or Fergie time.
You can look at it on such a way, but on the other way, I think that Israel succeed in their main goal of this kind of escalation, which was specifically the Jihad Islamic, divided from the Hamas and tried to divide as more as can be from Gaza's population. According to this, all the kind of the plans and the coming out of it, the attacks were under a very careful, first of all, not to damage those that I just mentioned, not to bring any kind of reasons to Hamas to be involved or to join, and secondly, to prevent from innocent people to be injured and killed. I think when you are looking about, first of all, the timing and timetable of this kind of escalation, it is very short. It's not surprising. With all the respect to terror organization, Jihad Islamic is not such a big one. Secondly, I think the success of Israel to target the commanders of the main units in Gaza from the Jihad Islamic is a great thing that really caused a lot of misunderstanding and waste a lot of time on the command and control inside Gaza by the Jihad Islamic. When you came to this stage and Israel has to look and say, we succeed to bring back Jihad Islamic to its place, besides the fact that Israel will continue its activities in West Bank in order to prevent any kind of terrorism, I think that the Jihad Islamic cannot show anything for itself of something that it succeed to have.
But perhaps the need for a victorious image
what we see now, that according to this week, it's a week already with all the readiness, etc., Hamas is outside of the game. Israel probably has 2 main activities. First, operational efforts. One is the operational effort. The second one is the negotiation that's in a low level. There is no something official by Israeli. We are waiting. It's a very sensitive junction. We can be on it and we can lose it under what we watched, observed the last 2 hours were heavily fire launching from Gaza and Israel attack back. It can cause something that can be a mine to the direction we are going.
Yes, and Mr. Badran, we're taking a short break in a second, but until then, briefly, if you can, my question to you is very simple. How long can Hamas stay out of it?
Well, Hamas is out of it for the moment. Which and it's for a few days now, and I think one of the main goals of the IDF was, and not only the IDF but also the government of Israel, the Zionist government of Israel, is having this policy as a goal by itself to split the Palestinians into different identities that are not coordinated, but even somehow they are enemies in between them, which means, and one of the main goals, which seems to be achieved by this so-called operation, which is a real fact of war on Gaza, is that Hamas is outside of the game, saying, I'm not involved, although Palestinians are being attacked.
We're talking a very crucial time from the Israeli standpoint now, as we've been discussing potential time for error. But if we're looking at the initial objectives of this operation when it was launched, this Israeli attempt to make a distinction between Hamas and Islamic Jihad, is it essentially paving the way to give a kosher stamp to Hamas in the future, Mr. Badran?
Sorry, to give a kosher what?
Stamp. To pave the way for Hamas essentially to become the Palestinian Authority, a reliable entity that can be treated as a potential partner for negotiations.
It depends about always the interests of Israel and the government of Israel. What I mean by that is, there is an allegation in the Israeli side says, look, there's a big problem to do an agreement with the Palestinians because they are divided to many entities and they are not really according one to each other, and this is our big problem to do peace with them. So when it goes for the interest of Israel, saying that the Palestinian party is not on one man state of mind, it's good for making them to
divide and conquer,
being divided.
Yeah.
Now, as you just mentioned, when it's for the interest of Israel, they will really prefer that Hamas will be there for them. Speaking about the ceasefire, as we just heard in this reportage, saying that the one who might be able to put an end to all this war on Gaza might be Yahya Sinwar himself and not anybody else, although we're speaking about many mediators, especially we're speaking about the Egyptians, although they are not really here, but they are trying to make all these pourparlers in between via telephone, and they're still speaking about all the other Arab states which had formed the Abraham agreements, that they are really absent for the moment, while at previous war against Gaza, they were giving their saying the word, saying against Israel, saying we do not accept what Israel is doing in Gaza, and this time on this role they're really quiet. We don't even hear them not anything about Israel, just speaking very highlights about what's going on and with no responsibility against Israel. And
Major General Dangot, if we can pinpoint another objective of from the Israeli standpoint, launching this operation, not just to make a distinction between Hamas and Islamic Jihad, but perhaps most notably between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, that was so, I would dare to say, intertwined recently. Every operation in the West Bank officially triggered some sort of a reaction from the Gaza Strip and vice versa.
It's both directions, I may say. First of all, I think that Israel is looking on Jihad Islamic as a terror movement all over the places they are presented. It's West Bank. The West Bank, in my opinion, is much more important now than Gaza. It's Gaza. Even in Gaza, they build their forces, of course, based on much more terrorists that are there, 10,000. They have all the arm of the launching of rockets. And when there are some of them in Lebanon or in Syria, doesn't matter. It's one base that we are touching. But according to what happened, the Jihad Islamic tried to connect things that are running in the West Bank towards Gaza. Even in Gaza, we came to understanding, concerning your former question, about way of that Israel look at Hamas as the entity in Gaza. The Jihad Islamic came here and said, we are connecting it, we are warning Israel if they are not going to release the one who was arrested, the way he was arrested, etc. We are going to threat the area around Gaza according to the people who are leaving them. That is something we cannot accept. Even Hamas, at many times in the past, didn't connect things that happened in the West Bank with their terrorism concerning Gaza. But on the other end, I think I may say something about the relationship between Hamas and the Jihad Islamic. In this case, I think that Hamas has few reasons why they stay outside or sitting on a flexible fence, let's call it
flexible fence is a good term.
Like this. First of all, they are after what happened a year and 3 months ago, and they have to to correct their damages, to build again their power infrastructure.
We've seen money being poured
producing rockets. Secondly, their main goal, strategic way, is to wait to the day after Abu Mazen. They are looking on the West Bank, they are looking on the PLO for their future, and they are not on readiness for it. The third reason, there are 2 million people there in Gaza that they have to pay for them attention. They are the entity, and meanwhile they are building the force. They have to see that those people has to improve their economic situation. The fourth reason is the fact, with all the respect, Hamas is not let's call it a friendly movement to Jihad Islamic, cannot come to the Jihad Islamic and we create escalation, and they are deciding for Hamas. It's losing its priority, and Hamas is very sensitive for such movements. And the fifth reason is Egypt. Egypt is the gate for moving from Gaza to the other part of the world, to their meetings, to get their money, to all the kind, for Hamas, also for Jihad Islamic. So Egypt has its own interior security interest to prevent from Hamas and Jihad Islamic a negative impact on the security situation in Egypt, like it was on 2013 with Morsi, for example, in this time of, and they have to pay attention to what is Egypt's interest. When you are looking about everything and the timing, Hamas till now is outside. Just to remind you that on 2019 was the former time of escalation between Israel and Jihad Islamic. Hamas was 90% of the time outside. Only in the last moment they participate. We see it as now. But what is the issue now? The issue now that we are in a sensitive hours, that with a lot of minds were pulled on the road, something that cannot be, let's say, taking care in a deep way by Israel can destroy all the process.
We'll have to make a stop right here because we're taking another short break, and we did not even mention the quiet in Jerusalem today, what could have turned into another volatile scene that did not. Major General Dangot and Mr. Badran, you're staying with us. Back in a bit. And now it seems that more reports indicate that ceasefire agreement has been reached indeed between Israel and Islamic Jihad, brokered by Egypt. These are reports that we're receiving as we speak. We will be bringing you more details on this apparent ceasefire once the details become available. According to these reports, the ceasefire will go intact as early as this evening. All of this while we're waiting for the Israeli Prime Minister to convene yet another security assessment here in Tel Aviv. Back here in the studio with Mr. Amir Badran, council member of the Tel Aviv Yafo municipality and a member of the Hadash party, and of course Major General in the Reserves, Mr. Eitan Dangot, former military secretary for 3 Israeli defense ministers, a lot on the agenda, and of course a former coordinator of government activities in the Palestinian territories. Gentlemen, we're hearing these reports about an emerging ceasefire that will go into effect in about 2 hours from now. We usually seeing this final push, so to speak, heavy bombardments or barrages of rockets ahead of a ceasefire. Remains to be seen if that will be indeed the case. But let's stay with the international angle for a second. The international credit this industrial quiet, so to speak, that Israel is getting from the international community. Do you identify any differences from previous rounds, Mr. Badran?
Yes, of course. We can see it quite clearly. The Abraham agreements, all the states such as Morocco, the Arab United Emirates, and so on. Morocco, for example, is one of the states that is really had tight relations with Palestinians, and in the previous operations against Gaza had a real part in condemning Israel with a clear stand, and this time we see that they are not really speaking anything. We spoke about Qatar. Qatar and Hamas is two words that goes together now, because Qatar is the one who's financing Hamas. Hamas is not taking part in this operation and leaving the Jihad Islami by itself. And then the biggest question is why Zionist government decide to attack Gaza now in this moment? Now there was no act of violence taking part from the Palestinian side, and the Palestinian
intelligence.
Just a second. And the Prime Minister of Israel was clearly saying that last year it was the quietest, the big quiet ever we had from Gaza Strip. Now this is something that should be making us really ask ourselves, why did we get there? And is there any justification for this attack against Gaza? Because this attack against Gaza, not as was mentioned before, that it was done to prevent innocent people of being killed, because at the bottom line, when we see how many people were killed in Gaza by the IDF fire, we can see that there is 36 people dead people, and among them 11 children. So
yes, but these numbers include also those casualties.
Yes, of course. There's three casualties.
Yeah.
Let's speak about these. There's 3 casualties from a jihad Islamic fire, and this is really bad. But that doesn't make it better. Doesn't make it better for Israel killing 8 children. You know, while we were speaking, two examples were given. The medias in Israel are not speaking about them, but there are families there. Naama Abu Kada is a 70 years old lady. She was preparing her wedding, her son's wedding yesterday, and she was killed from these strikes. Such as the same with another family, as Khalifa
the
family.
The devastation of war is obviously imminent, or rather present at any such a round of escalation. We're taking another break, and when we get back, we will be bringing you more details on this emerging ceasefire that is expected to take effect in about 2 hours from now. We're back in a bit. Mr. Eitan Dangot, if we are indeed nearing the end of this round, what would you say are Israel's next objectives?
I think the basic and the important one is to return back to the silence that has been before, and with a very deep message understanding by Jihad Islamic that they will not dare to interfere in something that happened in the West Bank concerning terrorism. And on the other hand, and this is, I'm sorry, but my colleague here has a great mistake, Israel entered to this situation because of a very deep secret intelligence that showed us that it's a question of hours and days that Jihad Islamic are planning to kill Israeli civilians by anti-tank missile ambush that were planned by one of them, by the guy that was yesterday killed by us, by the airstrike in Rafah. And I think by a very clever leadership that we closed over the area of nearby Gaza, that caused a lot of complaints by the population because we break their life from in the middle of the holidays and the weekends and what's going there, and they couldn't go to work in agriculture, etc. We succeed to prevent a very bad event that can even make worse the situation. So nowadays it will put the ball again led by Hamas. Secondly, when you're looking about maybe something for the future, I believe that when you have such occasion and you're looking for the day after, there is opportunity with the interfere of Egypt, with the support of the UAE, with the support of maybe Qatar, that Hamas will strengthen the timetable that they are agreed to make, like a long ceasefire with Israel, besides the fact that they are not accepting us as a state or as the right to live here, and of course they are for us a terrorism, but there is like a ceasefire, I cannot even call it Udna. So with such
why won't you speak about peace, for example, about doing peace between both sides?
It leaves the question now.
No government is speaking about them. It's just speaking about hitting them, the Palestinians, and having more time, 3 or 4 years of silence. We're not speaking only about silence. We're speaking about people. People are dying because there's no peace agreement.
People are dying.
And the government of Israel is refusing to speak about peace.
With
They're
whom?
refusing.
With whom?
With Hamas.
Okay.
With Fatah. With the Palestinian Authority. With all the entities. This is exactly what I just said before. When it doesn't come for the interest of Israel, she says there's nobody there to speak with. And when it's not in her interest, she says, okay, look, with whom should I talk? Should I talk to the Jihad Islamic or to Hamas or Fatah? There's a Palestinian Authority. It's still there.
No,
this is not another story. We're speaking about
one groom and many brides at this
Palestinian people and Israeli people are fighting each other for many years now.
With you.
Just a minute. Just let me make the point. The point is that there is 2 million people living in Palestinian, living in Gaza, being in the biggest prison on earth. Okay, and they are willing to be free, and they're asking for freedom. And for the moment, they're asking for freedom to create their home, not from Israel, to create their own country, their own state. And I'm saying this is time to speak peace. We are only speaking about hitting them and having more silence from them, and just putting them aside, not to hear from them, and trying to find all the excuses to make a war. And we're not speaking even one word, not even one, about peace.
Let me make some facts, because also in the time, and this is a story that I hope we will have opportunities also to talk about it more.
This is the main issue.
First of all, let us talk about peace between Hamas and the PA. Then
here we go. Here we go again.
Then ask Hamas to make.
Didn't you say just now that one of the best goals
I was listening to you very silent. You are not giving me to say a word. If you won't take this place, and that's all. If you want to listen to me, so be patient.
I was very patient, and I gave you to speak much more.
Gentlemen, please, Mr. Dangot, please conclude.
No, I cannot make it. I was listening to him very deeply. Hamas is not accepting Israel's existence. They are not recognizing Israel as a state, as a Zionist state. They are not recognize the agreement with the PA in Oslo. So without these 3 conditions, it can be like this for the future. Secondly, I might say that I have to look about facts. In this operation, most of the people that were killed, civilian, were killed by Jihad Islamic.
Most of them?
And
36
gentlemen,
people died from Palestinians. Most of them were killed by Jihad Islamic.
No, not the terrorists.
Amir Badran, Major General Eitan Dangot, thank you very much for this. This conversation will endure after a ceasefire, if and when is indeed achieved.